The Earl King's Promise, a short horror story, written by Stories from the Attic, narrated by Robin Mcconnell. Whenever people hear that I used to be obsessed with fairy tales, they always have the same expectation. They hear the word and immediately imagine me sitting in some powder-pink room, surrounded by My Little Ponies, stuffed animals, and storybooks about princesses. Most of these people are the folks I meet online. They have never met me in person or even seen my picture. Were they to actually meet me, to see the dark-rimmed eyes, jet-black hair, and clothing without a speck of colour, I'm sure they would be surprised. My question, though, is why? What is it about the association of women and fairy tales that instantly conjures for these people ideas of being childlike, innocent, and exaggeratedly feminine? Why the expectation that I'll know the words to every Disney song ever written, or wish that my hair was blonde, and that I could spend my whole life dressed like Princess Peach from the Mario games, or Elsa from Frozen? My response to those kinds of stereotypes has always been the same. After allowing these people to explain their misguided perceptions of who I am or what I am about, I ask the same loaded question. Have you ever actually read a fairy tale? Usually this is enough, but on some rare occasions I take it further, explaining exactly the kind of fairy tales I used to like. If that still doesn't work, if they don't go away and leave me alone, then I tell them, exactly as I am going to tell you now, precisely when and why I stopped reading fairy tales. The problem sometimes is one of confusion. Most of the time when I ask people if they have ever read a fairy tale in real life, they just smile or shrug and say that of course they have. Online they type some half-baked nonsense about Cinderella or Mother Goose and expect that to be enough. It isn't. A little digging and a few probing questions usually reveals the truth. What I often find is that, in fact, what they claim to have read was actually read to them, usually by a parent, an older sibling, or a babysitter. This is where the confusion starts. There is an issue with the delivery. Like the poison hidden in the apple, fairy tales are often hideous things made up to seem innocent. A shriveled carcass in a fancy box, presented with a bow on top. The manner in which the fairy tales are told contributes to this. The fact that they are read with a cooing lullaby voice intended to send the listener off to sleep or feel comforted means that the very idea of such stories is linked in the listener's minds with pleasant memories. Fairy tales are forever embedded in their thoughts as positive, comforting things, mixed up with ideas of being safe and secure. Sure, they are fantastical stories populated with strange and fabulous characters, but so is the Muppet Show. For the most part, fairy tales are entirely harmless. Somehow, this association, coupled with the fact that most children encounter the sanitized, watered-down versions of the stories, helps people to overlook the more gruesome or frankly terrifying elements. It is as if the way in which the tale is told somehow blankets the listener, shielding them from the prick of thorns, the sewing wheel's sharper edges, or the snapping jaws of the big, bad wolf. It's only when I ask them to retell the stories, to give me the main details, that the realization begins to dawn on them. As I proceed to point out how inappropriate, macabre, and questionable some of the content is, they start to see through the veil of innocence that youth threw over them. When I then go on to explain that the tales they never realized were so graphic and lurid are the cleaned-up versions, and that if one was to sit down and actually read some of the original myths, they would be horrified, they begin to see that my interest in fairy tales has very little to do with pink rooms and princesses. They also, often, begin to look for the exit. I have always been interested in the darker things. The melodramatic, the grotesque, the arabesque have always fascinated me far more than the mundane and normal. When I first stumbled upon the Grimm brothers' collection of folk tales, and even the later Charles Perrault version with Doré's sinister illustrations,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?